GaleForceWins is pleased to introduce a stream of thought leadership focused on family-owned businesses.
Family businesses are a unique breed and often, I think, misunderstood.
Something like 3.26 trillion, that's what the T is in Tommy, revenue from family businesses in North America alone.
Laura is a strategic planning and leadership development executive with extensive experience in coaching, leading teams, and cultivating relationships in the corporate and non-for-profit sectors. Laura brings her expertise in organizational and leader development, communicating for influence and impact, navigating complex transitions, and achieving peak performance to her work with clients to create powerful and resilient leaders.
Charles Chuck Firlotte is a corporate executive who has led transformational change across industry sectors in 4 countries. Currently, he helps organizations navigate growth and drive productivity through a focus on people, process, and profit. Well, hello, everyone. We're back. Family Business Take 2 with Laura Campbell and Charles Firlotte. It was very well received on my personal and business network, so I'm excited, Alan, to have them back again.
100%, Jerry, and I can tell you this, that we learned in the last episode that family businesses, big and small, contribute $3 trillion to the North American economy. I'm curious how they do that. So over to you folks.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have this conversation because, while family businesses are often thought of as perhaps being simpler, less complex than larger non-family business organizations, actually, I would argue that family businesses, while they may often be small, are perhaps even more complex. And today, I think we're going to talk about what makes up a family business and what are the systems that are in play as they grow and evolve. And Chuck, I'm actually curious, as families are either beginning or growing, scaling their businesses, how do they sort and manage the many diverse stakeholders that are influential in their growth?
That's a great question, Laura, and it's really key to setting the business up for success and to protect the family from itself, if you will. And there are 3 fundamental pillars that I see that are important to pay attention to and to nurture as the business grows. One is the family, the nuclear family. The second, in no particular order, the second is the business itself, the enterprise. And the third is the shareholder. Now, if husband and wife start a family business and it's a startup and they're making widgets around the kitchen table, then you're going to have the holy trinity. And so, the family is the business, is the shareholder, if you will. But as this entity grows, it becomes bigger and larger and more complex. And if you don't pay attention to these separate and distinct pillars that are all intertwined and interrelated in a family enterprise, you're going to have a bit of turbulence. Let me give you an example of what can happen in a family enterprise. A colleague of mine was working with a family business of about 35 employees. The father, the husband, if you will, was in the business. He was the president. His wife was not, and his son and daughter were. So 3 family members in the business: dad, son, and daughter. And the business had worked hard over the summer to come up with a strategy and define their product offering, and they were all ready to launch. And dad comes back after a weekend and changes the rules. We're not doing that. What had happened, he had spoken with his wife, who was not in the business, but was a shareholder, of course, owned half of the business with him. And she decided she didn't like it, and he reverse course. Now, if you're part of that leadership team, you want to tear your hair out after working on a strategy for a long period of time and having it just kiboshed like that. So let's take a look at the three component parts: the family, the business, the shareholder.
I would add one thing before you go into it. I think it's really interesting because the stakeholder network around a family business, it's comprised of informal and formal relationships, which I think is part of what adds to the complexity. And I think that the three systems that you're going to talk about, or we're going to talk about, helps to put some containers and some structure around those relationships that help, to your point, protect the business from itself.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's exactly what it does. From the family perspective, first of all, the family has to be in harmony. And we've seen more than enough businesses, large and small, that have not been in harmony and that have destroyed the business, right? So you strive for harmony, you strive for open communication. And it's what do we want to talk about as a family? What's our relationship with money and risk? What's our expected behavior? How do we deal with emotions? Family cohesion, family enterprise, family internships, family fun. How do we show up? That's important stuff to talk about as this enterprise grows. Because if it's established and rooted early, as you know, what are our values as a family? What are the 3-4 values that are going to define us as a family, and how do we strive to protect and root those values in the business? From the business perspective, then you're asking, okay, what's our communication strategy? How do we resolve conflict? Decision making. What's the business plan? Where's the business going? Where's the industry going? What kind of governance do we want and need? And what's our succession plan? And then from the shareholder perspective, it's again about governance, right? And what do we want to take from the business? What's the dividend policy? Shareholder agreements, prenuptial agreements, important to think about. Because as this business grows and you don't have prenups, you're going to have another shareholder show up one day that may not be overly invited to the fold. What about succession, and what about a board of directors? So those are the three: the family, the business, the shareholder. As you can see, they're interrelated. Some of them are thematic throughout the three, but it's important to really spend time. And you may have a family member who's in the business and who is the shareholder show up in all three. You may have one show up in one. But in my mind, a family member who's not in the business should not be making decisions on the business or have decisions to be made on the business, as that wife did in my prior example. So
it's really interesting because there will be voices, lots of voices.
Correct.
Right. But the nature of what we're talking about, the kinds of shareholders, informal or formal. And part of that, I like to think of it, there's a way of thinking about it is around, defining or designing an alliance, right? So some of those relationships early on, the family piece, it's how, you spoke about it a little bit, how are we behaving? How do we do things, both in times of ease and harmony, but even more so when there's not. Rules a little bit, rules of engagement around how do we operate, how do we behave when times are good and when there are very difficult conversations or difficult business moments that we have to navigate. And I think that defining and designing an alliance is really important to do. Governance can help, right? Good governance can help in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the family has an enormous amount of heft in this construct. It's really important for the family to get its act together in terms of communication, how they want to show up, and how they want to conduct themselves in and around the business. As an example, there are some families that I know of that make it essentially a rule that the younger generation does not go directly from university into the business, that they will go off somewhere for 2 to 3 years and work elsewhere or more, longer. And they get rooted and they see different ways and different ideas and different corporate cultures, and then come back to the business. That's not a bad construct. It has benefit. It has use. It has utility. So.
And getting clear on these three, it's important to do as early on as possible in the business. Correct. And it's also important to revisit them again in times of significant growth or transformation, right? So these things will impact significantly how the organization, the enterprise, looks at these three pillars. And so it's really important to do that, because addressing things when they go south in the moment is far more complex, right? Because of the nature of the business and because of the nature of the relationships, it is going to be far more difficult to do that. So being intentional, being strategic about it, being thoughtful about the what we're doing and how we're doing it, and the structures that are in place to hold and support those decisions is critical. Correct. Really critical to the success of the organization.
Exactly right. Laura, I think we've tested the attention span of our audience, and I would suggest that on our next roundabout, we talk about the journey of succession, the journey of employment into the business, how people are selected and chosen from the family, and how they are elevated, and who is elevated, and what do you do with people who are family members who may have gifts differing, who may be superbly talented, but perhaps not in the trade of the business. And what do you do there? And how do you do entitlement?
There's a difference between passion, commitment, and competency. So hard to sometimes pull apart, but let's see what we can do in our next video.
Give me that triad again. Compassion, commitment.
Passion, commitment, and competency.
Okay, good. So we'll discuss that in our next round. I thank you, Laura Campbell.
Thank you. So fun.
Well, what an absolute pleasure it is to have a front row seat into this conversation around the complexities and the opportunities in family businesses. Thank you very much.
GaleForceWins is pleased to introduce a stream of thought leadership focused on family-owned businesses.
Family businesses are a unique breed and often, I think, misunderstood.
Something like 3.26 trillion, that's what the T is in Tommy, revenue from family businesses in North America alone.
Laura is a strategic planning and leadership development executive with extensive experience in coaching, leading teams, and cultivating relationships in the corporate and non-for-profit sectors. Laura brings her expertise in organizational and leader development, communicating for influence and impact, navigating complex transitions, and achieving peak performance to her work with clients to create powerful and resilient leaders.
Chuck Firlotte is a corporate executive who has led transformational change across industry sectors in 4 countries. Currently, he helps organizations navigate growth and drive productivity through a focus on people, process, and profit.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.